Hashem, today's daf yomi is Shevuos daf Chavav, Shevuos 26, but we are going to start on the bottom of Chav Hey Amar Beis at the first wide line. So we are dedicating this daf for Shmir for the Chayalim Atzal for the Shvuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. Gemara is having a debate between Rav and Shmuel, whether or not a Shevuos Bitoy applies even if it cannot be formulated in the future. And Shmuel says if the oath cannot be formulated in the future tense, it does not apply, whereas a Rav says it does apply. But it says, nevertheless, Amar Abaye, Moda Rav would admit, but Omer Chavero, that person who says to his friend, Shvua Shani Yodei Lecha Edus, he says, I know testimony for you, Vishtakach, but in the end it's discovered he doesn't know the potter. In that case, Rav would admit that he's exempt from the carbon of Shvuas Bitoy. The reason is because it would not be included in the category of I don't know testimony for you. Meaning to say, because if he would swear, I don't know testimony for you, that's not a Shvuas Bitoy, but that's a Shvuas Edus. And so therefore, this oath that I know testimony for you this oath cannot be formulated in a statement of la v'hein, of yes or no. So even though Rav does not require it to be formulated in the future, it cannot be that's true, but it does need to be able to be formulated in the expression of la v'hein. And the reason why he's not liable if he says, I don't know testimony for you, because that this is not going to be considered a Shvuas Bitoy, but a Shvuas Edus. And a Shvuas Edus, which you do bring carbon oil Yored for, that's only if you make it in a Bezdin with witnesses. So therefore, under these circumstances, Rav says you're not liable, says Abaye. And also, says Abaye continuing, let's say you say Yadati v'lo Yadati, but if you would say I know testimony or I do not know testimony, and that's testimony that's not needed now, but you say I know testimony, that means to say you can't make the oath about the future. So that's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Or if you say hey arati v'lo hayarati, since that also cannot be formulated in the future because it's about the past, I testified or I did not testify, that's also a dispute, because you can't say I will testify. That's not an oath you can make about the future. Bishlam Shmuel the Amar Milsa the Gemara says, why does the Torah have this whole law of Shvuas Edus in the first place? Shvuas Edus is really like a category of Shvuas Bitoy in the sense that it's an utterance, and so therefore, why does the Torah separate it into a special category called Shvuas Edus, that oath that you denied that you know testimony? So the Gemara says, Bishlam Shmuel makes sense according to Shmuel why you have a separate category of Shvuas Edus. Milsa the Leisa Ba'aba or Mechayev, because something that cannot be formulated in the future, therefore, generally speaking, he says, you wouldn't say you're liable for the past. And so therefore, the idea that I don't know testimony, since it can't be stated in the future, because you can't say, I will not know testimony, that's a Shvuas Shav. And so since the Shvuas Bitoy, you'll be exempt. So therefore, the Torah says it's a separate category. It's no longer a Shvuas Bitoy, but it's a Shvuas Edus, and therefore you're liable for it, even though it can't be formulated in the future. But according to Rav, even though it can't be formulated in the future, you'll be liable in the past. So why does the Torah specify this whole concept of Shvuas Edus? So there were some Chachamim in the yeshiva, and they said in front of Abaye, so why does the Torah tell us that there's something called the Shvuas Edus, to say that you're liable for two karbanos? One, because you're liable Shvuas Bitoy, carbon over Yored, and also in Shvuas Edus. So the Gemara says, Amru, Tarati Matitsu Amru. So Abaye responded to them, you can't say that. You can't say that to be liable for two karbanos. Titania, because we learned in the Brayso, it says by Parshas carbon over Yored, you're guilty for one of those. It means you're not going to be liable for 2 karbanos of all of the orades. So therefore, you can't say that that's what's going on here. So the Gemara says, well, what's your answer, Abaye? According to Abaye, why did the Torah say Shevuos Eidos is a separate category from Shevuos Habitus, from Shevuos Habitui? So the Gemara says, to teach us the following. By all of the sins that are listed by carbon all of the Yored, i.e. Shevuos Bitui, Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, by all of those sins, it says the word V'Nelam, which means he sinned accidentally. The Kamba by Shevuos Eidos, Onema V'Nelam. By Shevuos Eidos, it does not say the word V'Nelam, and that is L'chayev al Mezid Kushogeg, to say that you're liable if you did it intentionally, in addition to accidentally. So therefore, the Torah says a specific law. And we wouldn't know this just from Shevuos Bitui, because Shevuos Bitui is only chayiv if you do it accidentally. So Amrulei Rabbanon, Abaye. So the Rabbanon said to Abaye, we're 7 lines in the bottom on 25b. So the Rabbanan said to Abaye, but maybe you could say that if you take this Shevuos Eidos intentionally, you're liable for 1 carbon. B'shogeg mechayev tarti. But if you did it accidentally, you'd be liable to 2 carbonos. 1 because of Shevuos Eidos and 1 because of Shevuos Bitui. So Amar Lahu, no, so Abaye respond to them. This is why it says, this is what I told you. That's why it says in the verse, for one of these things, you're only liable 1 carbon and not 2. And if you're going to say that this law applies even 2 carbonos, if somebody swears intentionally, would you be liable to 2 carbonos? On Shevuos Bitui, you're not chayav b'mezid. So we have to say that the meat in the verse is with respect to a shogeg, and you're only liable for 1. So now we're going to say Rava argues with Abaye, and he says, why is it, again, we're asking the question, why does the Torah say a separate category according to Rav of Shevuos Eidos? Why does the Torah have to specify Shevuos Eidos? That there is that you bring carbon all of the Yored if you say this false oath that you did not know testimony. Rav Amar Mishum Dave Davar Bechal Liyatzo Lidom B'Davar Chadash. Rav says, now we already know that if you take a Shevuos Eidos, you're not liable to. The reason why we know you're not liable to is because Mishum Dahave, because the Shevuos Eidos is something Davar Shebechal, is something in the general category of oaths. And then it went out to teach us something new by its own. That means to say that you're only liable if you're able to be a witness and in a court. And so therefore, we only learn its new thing, meaning to say it's a completely separate category from Shevuos Bitui. Miklal, the Gemara says, the Abaye Savar Iso Shvuah Ba'olam. So from here, we want to say that Abaye must be of the position that if you take an oath, that you've taken an oath in the world, that you've fulfilled the concept of Shevuos Bitui, but you're just not liable because of 2 carbonos, because of the word achas. But didn't Abaye say that Rav himself would admit that if you say I don't know testimony, and he finds that he doesn't know the potter, that he doesn't bring because since it can't be part of the category of lavahain, and so therefore this is not a Shevuos Bitui at all. So the Gemara says, Abaye reversed that position. Abaye is saying we're now on top of 26. We're now on the top of 26a. That Abaye didn't say both of them. He only gave that Rav Papa gave one of those answers. And we're on top of 26a, and we're up to the next line in the Mishnah. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning. Good morning. So the Gemara says, we learned from the Mishnah, Rabbi Ishmael says that a Shevuos Bitui is not liable, that you're not liable for the past for a Shevuos Bitui. You're only liable if you take an oath about the future, but not about the past. Meaning to say, Rabbi Akiva says you're liable for an oath about the past, or Rabbi Ishmael says you're only liable for an oath about the future. So the Gemara is going to establish what's the source for their opinions. Tana Rabbanan, the Gemara says, it says in the past that the Brisa says, if you take the Shevuos Bitui, and it says for good or for bad. I might think things that can be possibly categorized as positive or negative. Let's say it's not something that can be categorized as positive or negative, something you have no benefit from, like let's say throwing a stone into the sea, as we saw earlier in the Mishnah. Minayin, how do we know that they're also under the liability? So this is something that an oath that you'll take with vates vasayim means say it includes anything coming out of your lips. I might only know that this applies only to the future because is about the future. How do we know that also applies to the past? Anything you say, that's the position Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel Omer La'aro Eitev is La'aba. It only applies to the future. So it says Rabbi Akiva, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Im Kain, Ein Li Al Dvarim Sheish B'Ein Tava V'Ara. I might only think that's something good or bad. Dvarim She'ein B'Ein Hara V'Tova Minayin. How do I know it includes, let's say, like throwing a stone into the sea? How do you know why you're liable? Amar Lo Mi Riboy HaKosav. Does look in the verse adds on, Kol Asher Yivatei Adam B'Shvuah. So Amar Rabbi Akiva says, "In Riba Kasa Lakach, Riba Kasa Lakach." This was from our mission. Rabbi Akiva says, once you're adding it on, include even things that are not Haral Tev, include also things about the past. So the Gemara says, well, that was what we learned in our mission, and also repeated here in the Brisa. So Shapir, Ka'amar way, Rabbi Akiva gave a good response. Rabbi Shmuel, Kol Asher Yivate includes both. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan's response is Rabbi Shmuel Sheshimesh. Their machokas is based upon actually an earlier machokas. It's drawing from something earlier. Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Shmuel Sheshimesh, that's Rabbi Nechunyan ben Akanya. Rabbi Shmuel served Rabbi Nechunyan ben Akanya. Hayadorish is called Torah Kula B'midas called Prat. He expounded the whole Torah based upon a general, followed by specific, by general and specific. And Iunami Dorish B'Kol Prat. So Rabbi Yishmael also expounds the Torah in that way by Klal Prat, and therefore he limits it to the future, not the past. But Rabbi Akiva, Sheshimish is Nachum Mishgamzu. Rabbi Akiva served Nachum Mishgamzu. And we know this, that Rabbi Akiva served him, it says in the Gemara in Chagiga, he served him for 22 years. That's why Rabbi Akiva, also Nachum Mishgamzu, always say Gamzu Latova. Everything is for the best. Rabbi Akiva said everything that God does is for Latava Avid. Nachum Mishgamzu said also this is for good. So, but he said, Rabbi Akiva said everything is for good. You want to know how Rabbi Akiva came about? He came about because he served Rabbi Nachum Mishgamzu. He was his assistant for 22 years. But he expounded the whole Torah in Riba Umiyat, expansion and limitation. So Iu Nami Dorish Riba V'miyat. So in this case also, where he includes the past, he's expounding it by Riba V'miyat. It's more inclusive. So let's see how he got there. And the Gemara is going to say both how Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva get there. My Rabbi Akiva to Dorish Riba V'miyat. How does Rabbi Akiva expound Riba V'miyat? Titania, because it says in the verse, "Onefesh kisi shava," a person will take an oath. That's a riba. That's expansive, meaning to say any type of oath. La roa good or bad. That's a miyat. That's a limitation. Kol asher yivate adam. Anything a person says, chazav riba miyot to riba kol. So it's the riba is including everything. My riba kol milei. My miyat devar mitzvah. That it's included everything, meaning the future and the past, and what's it limit, and even something that is not good or bad, like throwing a stone into the sea. What's it limiting? It's limiting only a dvar mitzvah. If you take an oath to nullify a mitzvah, that won't take effect. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel Darish Klal Prat, Rabbi Shmuel does a general followed by specific. It says, "Onefesh kisi shiva levate b'sfasayim." Anybody will take an oath. That is a klal. That's a general. That's a specific. For good or bad, that's a specific. Anything that a person says, chazav v'klal, follow protocol, general followed by specific, followed by general. Yatadan elkein prat. It has to be like the specific. Just like the specific is about the future. It has to be about the future. What is the general rule helping? It's coming to include even those things that are not good or bad. They can't be categorized as positive or negative, like throwing a stone into the sea. but they have to be about the future. Ahani prate, what's the specific coming to do? Miyute, to exclude a field farm sheish ben hara tov shavar. It's excluding the past. So the Gemara has said, Gemara says, Epochana. Well, Gemara says, why don't we reverse it? Why don't we say about all these things that they have to be? Means that Rabbi Shmuel said it includes la roa tev about the future, but not about the past. Why don't we say it does include la roa tev, but it does apply to the past? Why don't it seems random that you're applying it in that way. You could apply it the reverse way. So Amar Rav Yitzchak, dumya de la roa tev. No, that his statement has to be similar to la roa tev. Meaning to say, Mishe Suro Mishum Bal Yachel Tvaro. It has to be something that comes in the category of do not say, making your words profane. Yatza Sazu, but excludes this case about the past, She'eni Suro Mishum Bal Yachel Tvaro, because it doesn't fit into the category of saying these nonsensical words, Ela Mishum Bal Teshakra, but it refers to lying, and so that's the reason. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Avin gives a different answer. Why do we say that from Klal Prat to Klal we're only including an oath about the future? Amakra nefesh kisi shaval vateis vasayim. Someone will take an oath with his utterances. Misha shvua kodemes labitoy. It's something. This refers to something where the oath, the action has to have come before the utterance. Meaning to say that he utters the oath before the doing of the action, like an oath about the future. The first the person takes an oath, and afterwards he does the action to fulfill it or to nullify it. Not where the utterance is about the action which was in the past. And so therefore excludes that's why it excludes an action, an oath about the past. I ate or I didn't eat, where the action comes before the oath. Gemara brings a brisa that now expounds the rest of this verse. Tana Rabbanan, it says with respect to the obligation of a Shevuos Bitoy, it says, Ha'adam b'shvuah. It says, Onefesh kisi shaval vates v'sayim ha'rei tev chosher yivatei ha'adam b'shvuah v'ne'elaman. A person will take an oath, and then he doesn't do it. It teaches us that he needs to be an Adam by the time of the Shevuah, meaning to say that he has to be complete of sound mind. Prala anus excludes somebody who was duressed, meaning to say he was not of sound mind, and so therefore, or he didn't understand, and he didn't realize he couldn't do it, or he thought the oath that he took was actually a true oath. V'ne'elam, and we see from here, he's only liable for this carbon olav yored, prat amazing, if he did it accidentally, not intentionally. V'ne'elam mimenu, shenis'alma mimenu shvuah, meaning to say, he violated his oath. He forgot he took an oath, and therefore he violated. I might think that, let's say, even though he remembered the oath, but he forgot about the object that he took the oath about. The Gemara is going to explain what we're talking about. He forgot about the oath. He's liable for forgetting about the oath, but not forgetting about the object. So let's talk about this. This excludes the case of a person who made the oath under duress. What are we referring to? Like Rav Kahana and Rav Asi taught, when they were in front of Rav and they were studying about him. Mar Amar, one of them would say, Shvuasa da'ach Rav. They were so convinced that Rav said this. One said, I take an oath that Rav said this. Umar Amar Shvuasa da'ach Rav. They said, I'm so convinced that Rav said this. Ki also kame the Rav. When they came in front of Rav and they argued, Amar Kechamana. He said, I said this. Like one of them. Amar La'idach, V'ana b'shikra ishtavi. So the other one said, I swore falsely. Amar Libcha. He said, no, you didn't swear falsely. Your mind confused you. You thought you were swearing correctly, but you swore falsely. And so therefore, you don't have to have an oath because you thought you were swearing correctly at that point. But now he forgot that it was an oath. He forgot that it was an oath. I might think even if he forgets the object, says the price. You're only liable if you forget the oath, but not the korban. Now to show they laughed at the brisa. Now, normally we could see Machaku Alei is on the position of Amorayim that they laugh, but here they're laughing in the brisa. They're laughing not because they disagree with the brisa. They're laughing because obviously they felt this was obviously a text that was not accurate. They said, we understand that you can have an oath without an object. You can have an oath without forgetting an object. To go into Shevuos and he says an oath that I will not eat bread that's wheat. And afterwards, he thought that he said he will eat the bread. So Shevuos in Shechafet stuck here. So it could be a case where he remembers his oath, but he forgets the object. How can we have an object without an oath where he's exempt? What could that be the case? Kigon, do you want to say Kigon to Amar? And he took an oath that he's not going to eat wheat bread. And he thought it was barley. That remembers the oath but forgot the object. No, that won't work. Even the chavtze since he forgot the object, I know elam shvua. That is in essence, he forgot the oath. Doesn't make sense. Elam Rebbe Lazar Davida Achasi. So Rebbe Lazar says, yeah, the brisa is not accurate. It must be that forgetting the oath and forgetting the object are the same thing. You can't have one without the other. Maskefla Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef challenges Alma, according to Rabbi Elazar and you can't have a case where you remember the object but not the oath. Well, if that's the case, I'll tell you how you could have it. As he says, I took an oath that I'm not going to eat bread that's wheat. And he thinks he's taking out a piece of barley, and in the end he takes out wheat. He thought it was barley, so he completely had no knowledge of the object, but he forgot about the oath. So, meaning to say, you could have the object you could have forgetting about the object, but remembering the oath. He remembered the oath, but he forgot about the object because he thought it was wheat, but it was barley, or he thought it was barley, but it was wheat. So Amarle, so Abai says no. Abai says to Rabbi Yosef, why are we saying that you'll have to bring the carbon? Because of what he's holding in his hand. And with respect to this bread, Elam Shvuli, he forgot that it's under oath. And so there, it's Hainu Hach, they're the same thing, basically. Alternatively, Amar Rabbi Yosef, sof carbon the Kamaisi, Allah the high pass me us. Elam Shvul. No, in the end, he's bringing the carbon on that piece of bread, which is he forgot that he had an oath on it. Rabbi Yosef, Amracha, Rabbi Yosef, the Gemara explains Rabbi Yosef's logic. He says, Kivan dechiyada dechitenu parish mimenu. Since if he had known it was wheat, he would have separated from it. It's called helam chafetzu. It's called the forgetting of the object. Let's say a person forgot that he take an oath that he's not going to eat the wheat bread, and he also thought that this bread is not wheat, so he forgot both. Mao. Yes. Oh, so that's a different case. Then would it apply? Because there the oath doesn't apply to the forbidden.
Said it doesn't apply. Something.
Right.
If you accidentally eat trade or whatever and manufacture food,
the oath didn't take effect in the first place.
No, because you said no, you have an oath sign.
Right.
If you eat, you bring up for example accident. You bring
a nevela. No, bring a chatas only in a case where if you do it intentionally, it would be kares. And the veil is not kares. Chayla would be. So, let's say you forgot both. You forgot you took an oath and you forgot that it was on the wheat bread. And he thinks it's not wheat bread, he thinks it's barley bread. Now, what would be the law there? Is that going to be liable? Like now we get to the nafkamina, why we care about all this. Is that going to be considered like you forgot your oath and you're liable, or you forgot the object and you're exempt? Well, this is a helam shvul. He forgot the oath. He's liable for the carbon. Other person, I forgot the chayfetz and he's exempt. Amar Rav Ashi chazinon. No, let's look at it like this. Imach mashvua kaparish. If you would have told him you have an oath and he would have jumped away, that's elam shvua. Imach maschefetz kaparish. If they told him no, it's wheat bread, he would have jumped. We have to see what would have been motivating him. So Amar Ravino Ravashi Kum Parash Mishvua El Mishum Chafetz. He says no. The only reason why he's jumping away from the oath is because of the object. And Kum Parash Mishum El Mishum Shvua. El Oshna. It doesn't matter. Meaning to say they're the same. They're interchangeable. And so therefore he's going to be, like we said earlier, in this case where you can't do one without the other. We had this case earlier. He's exempt. Be lenient. So Bamine Ravame Rav Nachman. Since we said in the Brisa that if you take an oath about the past with the mistake, you're considered to be an anus, and he's exempt. So the Gemara says, what is the case then where you are liable for an oath about the past? If you thought you were correct, you're not liable. So what is the case of shigas bitoy for the past that you have to bring a carbon? If he knows exactly and he's making a false oath, who it's intentional. If he doesn't know, we just said it. You didn't know, that's you're an honest. You thought you were correct. So I'm right, but Omer Yodeani Sheshvua Zu Asura Avoeno Yodeim Chayavo at carbon allow. So Rav Nachman said to Rav, you can find it where you say, I know I'm swearing falsely, I know that it's prohibited, but I didn't know that I'm liable for a carbon. And so therefore that's considered a shogeg and you're liable. The Gemara says, whoa, this relates back to a Gemara we had in Masechah Shabbos, with respect to a person who commits a sin, but he forgot what the punishment was that sin. He forgot that you're liable for a chatas. So do we say under those circumstances it's a chatas and you have to bring a carbon or not? According to Mumbuz, that you would be liable. It's called shigas carbon, that you forget that it's a carbon, that's called a shiga, that's called an accident. Whereas according to the Chachamim, that's not called an accident and you're exempt. So the Gemara is from the carbon, you're exempt from the carbon. So come on, Kamumbas, Damar Shimas, carbon, Shmaka, Shigat. So this is like Mumbas, who says that if you didn't know the exact punishment, you just know it's prohibited, that's called a shogeg. The Gemara says, no, I feel it Rabbanan. You could even say it like the Rabbanan. I kind of will put the Rabbanan like the Mumbas. Why the Rabbanan argue with Mumbas in Masechah Shabbos? It's only because the Kol Torah Kula, the rest of the Torah, the Lav Chidushu, because it's not a Chidush that for Shigas you're Chayav Chatas, because for any curry's penalty you have to bring, if you do it accidentally, you bring a Chatas. The Kol Torah Kula Ashkachan, but here it's a Chiddush, the Chiddushu, because the rest of the Torah will Ashkachan Lav the Maisi carbon. We never find the regular prohibition that you bring a carbon, but the Maisi carbon, the Alfinan me avoda zara, because we usually compare it to avoda zara. Where in this case of Shevuos Pito, you do bring a carbon, and so therefore I feel Rabbanan modu. So even the Rabbanan would admit that if you didn't know that you bring a carbon here, you have to bring a chatas. So when do you bring a chatas? When do you bring the carbon all of the yored on the Shevuos Pito? It's only in a case where you know that you're swearing falsely, but you just didn't know the punishment. Okay, let's say take an oath about a loaf of bread that you're not going to eat it, and then you come to a situation where you need to eat it. You're starving, and so therefore the only thing you can eat is this loaf of bread, and then you forgot your oath and you ate it. So you took an oath you're not going to eat bread. Now you need to eat it because otherwise you're going to die, but you forgot that you hadn't taken an oath. Will you be liable for carbon? So the Gemara says, well, mistaken. Well, since he's in danger of his life, if he would come and he would ask, it would be permitted. So therefore, since it would have been permitted, also if he ate it by forgetting, of course, he will be exempt from the carbon. So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about a case of elements da'er. We're talking about who is in pain, but he wouldn't be starving. So he would have eaten it intentionally, but he wouldn't have been necessarily allowed. But he ate it without remembering that he'd have to bring a carbon. So Amrulay, Tanina, Shav mi also, but didn't we learn in the Brisa? Somebody who had he remembered the oath. He would have eaten. He was in distress. He would have eaten the bread because he was uncomfortable, but he forgot that he would have had to bring a carbon for violating the oath. Right. He forgot that there's a carbon associated with it. So does he have to bring a carbon there? What do they say there? But that's what we said. Forgetting the oath is not that. Yeah. Right. So what would be the law? So I'm related to Nina. Shav me dia. So if he had a idea. Okay, so he forgot that he took the oath, but it means when he took the oath.
You know, the situation you make me red and you're hungry, and then like you wake up in the middle of the night and you're hungry, you just go grab a piece of bread and eat it. And then for that moment you forgot the oath.
So that's what we're talking about here. Well, it could be either one, actually. It could be that because we say shigas carbon is shigas shvua, but you're right. I think you're right that he forgot about the oath. But if he would have remembered, he would have eaten it anyway. So do we say shavmi diyaso that if he had known, he would have known that it was prohibited and he would have eaten it? Maybe carbon al shagaso. Then he would bring in carbon. Lo shavmi diyaso. But if he would not have known, he may be carbon al shagaso. If he would not have done it, then he would not have bring a carbon. And so this person, since he would have violated it in distress, and this person, since if he had not forgotten the oath, he would have intentionally done it. So therefore, he's not going to be considered shav midiaso, and so therefore he's exempt from a karba under these circumstances. Meaning to say that when do you bring a carbon? Only if you would not have done the sin, but intentionally. But if you would have done it, then you don't bring a carbon. You did too much of a sin. Amar Shmuel, Gamar Belibo, let's say a person decided that he's going to violate this oath. Let's say a person just thought about it, but he didn't actually say it. Sharach seyotzi bisfasav. It's not enough to have it in mind. You have to actually literally say it. It says levate bisfasayim. Meaning it's not enough to just think the oath, you have to say it. Meisvei, this happens a lot. A person has let's say, he commits to something in his mind. So the Gemara challenges that. Meisvei bisvasayim, below believe. So the Gemara challenges it from a Brisa. The Brisa says bisvasayim, meaning to say you have to say it with your lips. Below believe, but not by heart. Gemara belibo. Let's say he says it in his mind. How do we know it still applies? It says, meaning to say anything he thinks. Not like Shmuel says that if you just think it, it's not applicable. Gemara says, "Hagufa kasha." Well, this price itself is contradictory. Amr bisvasayim will believe. It says bisvasayim with the lips and not in the mind. Other amr skabar melibo minayin, and then it says, "How do we know if you did it in your mind? It does apply." So it says, "Rav Sheshes halol kasha alcha kamar." This is how we read it. Bisvasayim v'lo shagamar belibo lahotzi bisvasa v'lo hotzi. So let's say when it says bisvasayim with his lips, and not if he just thought about it, this comes to exclude a case where lahotzi bisvasav v'lo hotzi, that he had in mind to say it, but he didn't actually say it. Gamar belibo stam, but let's say he just thought about it, but he never had in mind to say it. Minayin, how do we know that it applies? So the Gemara says that Shmuel kasha, but according to Shmuel, the Brisa is difficult because Shmuel says it wouldn't apply at all. But according to the first approach, it applies if you had in mind to say it, but you didn't say it. No, you can explain the Brisa like this: Bisvasayim v'lo gamar belibo hotzi pas klitin. V'hotzi pasa oren. Oh, sorry. Rav Sheshes says it refers to something else. What does it mean with your lips? Not if you had in mind to say wheat bread, but instead he said barley bread. That's not an oath at all. But gamar belibo lahotzi pas klitin, hotzi pastan. But let's say you had in mind to say wheat bread, but instead you just said bread. How do we know that you're in that case will be prohibited to wheat bread? So that's l'kol asher yivatei adam. So that's how Rav Sheish just explains it, and that's not a question on Shmuel. Meisveis, the Gemara says, but it says Motzes Fasachat Shmor Vasisa. It says in the pasuk, you have to guard what you say. Eli Ela Hotzi B'Svasav. Gamar Belibo Minayin. How do we know that if you just thought about it, you're liable? Tam Omer calling a deep wave. So there we see that it is applicable. No, but that's talking about a Nidre Kodesh. So that's a holy vow. So even though when I take just a regular oath, I need to actually say it. But when it comes to the temple, if I say I'm going to give $1 million to the synagogue in my mind, like, or the temple in my mind, that's called the div wave. So there it says it applies. V'nigmar minei, but why don't we learn from there to all the cases? Gemara says no. Mishum davish truma v'kachim shnei ksuvim aban kecha, because truma and kachim are two verses that come together. Kol shnei ksuvim aban kecha. So since there are two verses that say this idea that even in your mind it applies, one by kachim, one by sacred, like the base of Mikdash, other by truma, which is special food for the Kohen. Since it says it only by those verses, it doesn't apply anywhere else. So the Gemara, where does it say it by truma? It says by truma, it says, but not, excuse me, truma is the donation to the Mishkan. And that's what it refers to, not truma food. Kol div wave hevium. And also by Kachim, it says kol div wave olos. So since there are two verses that say it only applies in those two areas. According to one that says you can learn out, even though it says in two cases. Have a chulin v'kachim and chulin v'kachim will come. No, we wouldn't learn out regular areas from kachim. Okay, I know we went a little longer. We'll stop here. Today's Yeshua.